This is the intro. Haven't even got my light on. Boom. And the Lord said, let there be light. And voila, there is light. Oh, this is Willow. She is at the beginning of all my videos now. Originally my plan was to make a video about Jordan Peele's recent film, Nope. However, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about the script at the moment. It's something I really want to do justice when discussing it, because I just totally love it. So instead, we're going to talk about some nice and easily digestible Shakespeare. Specifically, I wanted to talk about Macbeth, or the Scottish play, if you want to avoid the curses. I've already said Macbeth though, so this video's cursed. I'm not going to get any views. I recently rewatched the 2015 adaptation of Macbeth, directed by Justin Kurzel, a filmmaker from Australia who's also tackled the Snowtown murders in Snowtown and the legend of the bushranger Ned Kelly in the film The True History of the Kelly Gang. He also did Assassin's Creed, but we don't talk about that. I remember originally watching Kurzel's adaptation of the Scottish play in the cinema, way back when I was studying Macbeth in English class. It completely blew me away and invigorated my interest in the story, as well as helping my understanding of Shakespeare as a whole. I might not be emphasising it enough, but I really do love the story of Macbeth. I think it's phenomenal and has always been my favourite of Shakespeare's plays. I'll happily take this opportunity to mention that I even played Macbeth in a school play when I was 18. I mean, I've even got a tattoo to commemorate that play. There it is. That's the tattoo. That's what it means. Suffice to say, I'm a big fan. However, I can't say I'm exactly chomping at the bit to read Macbeth all the time. I think it's a brilliant story and has some incredible characters and soliloquies and monologues, but whenever I think of Macbeth, I can't help but picture Michael Fassbender storming across a fiery landscape as he presses forwards to face his destiny. For me, the 2015 film is my definitive adaptation of Macbeth. There's many reasons why I love this film so much. Fassbender and Cotillard bring a brilliant level of nuance and naturalism to their performances. Jed Kurzel's score is mesmerising and imposing. The production value is phenomenal. It's got David Thewlis in it, need I say more? But one thing that really sticks out for me about the film are the visuals. And without trying to overhype it too much, Macbeth has my favourite visuals in a film of all time. So much for not overhyping it. There are so many important aspects to consider and explore with films, so many contributing factors. But as someone who operates primarily on a visual level and learns through visuals, cinematography and aesthetics are very important to my film watching experience, and is oftentimes the first thing that I pick up on. I've even been very forgiving of films that look like gorgeous oil paintings that have come to life, but have very little beneath the surface. And that's something that's often been to the amusement of my friends. But for a film like Macbeth, I feel strongly that the visual style is what further propels this tale old as time to new heights and makes a very familiar story feel more special. Before going into the technical aspects of the film, I wanted to touch upon plays that have been adapted to films in the past and some of the challenges that can come with that. Adapting stories is nothing new to the world of cinema. Filmmakers are constantly turning to books and fairy tales and comics for inspiration. For the most part, all stories in all walks of life are able to transcend their medium and flow naturally into new forms of art. Stories hold so many recognisable features and narrative flows that allow them to be flexibly moulded into new shapes. There are just an infinite amount of possibilities in which you could retell a familiar story. As such, it becomes a fascinating challenge when filmmakers turn to other media to adapt, because it opens up your curiosity into seeing how they can change and alter something that has already been told before for a different medium. That is, of course, setting aside how a lot of films nowadays like to rehash old ideas and pander to nostalgia, but yeah. Shakespeare's work has been adapted into film in a multitude of ways. Whether it's an abridged telling of Hamlet with Laurence Olivier, a modern-day retelling of Romeo and Juliet by Baz Luhrmann, or converting The Taming of the Shrew into 10 Things I Hate About You. Macbeth itself has received numerous film adaptations, with directors such as Roman Polanski, Boo, Orson Welles, and most recently Joel Cohen attempting to explore the familiar themes of treachery, fate, and moral decline through a unique and distinct cinematic lens. Naturally, adapting stories intentionally made for theatre as cinematic releases can be tricky. There are simply some clear-cut differences that distinguish the two mediums from one another, and certain loose rules that should be followed. For the most part, theatre asks audiences to suspend disbelief, to let the subconscious fill in the missing pieces, and to observe the story from a more objective lens. It's also considerably more raw. There's no room for error, no cutaways or fixing in post. You just exist in the moment in time. Meanwhile, films generally look to immerse the audience more, to convince them and essentially trick them into believing what they're seeing is real. As such, things are more intimate. We observe the finest details that would usually go unnoticed on a large stage, and we are completely locked into the idiosyncrasies that mirror reality. Oh, I can't say that last bit. Mirror reality. Mirror reality. There you go. That's a stupid line. I am massively generalising, and both theatre and films can push boundaries in their own ways, but it does point to a simple problem that can occur from attempting to put work onto a screen that is actually intended to be performed on a stage. To avoid confusion or uncertainty, Justin Kurzel's Macbeth quite simply leans into historical realism to not only distinguish it as an adaptation, but to also avoid the pitfalls of putting stage to screen. It's through this emphasis on slightly heightened realism and loose historical accuracy that the film becomes a wholly different experience of the familiar Scottish play. It doesn't reinvent the wheel by any means in terms of the actual plot itself. Instead, it looks to recontextualise Macbeth as a remnant of history, a glimpse into a very real and very unforgiving time. It's through this shift towards naturalism that the film manages to create a distinct visual language that operates on a brilliantly cinematic level. Diving into the technical side of Macbeth, there is just plenty to sink your teeth into. Cinematographer Adam Arkapour crafts some truly breathtaking images of the Scottish landscapes, rendering some fantastically composed shots of the characters just blending so naturally into their environment. The opening battle sequence of the film is a brilliant moment to examine in regards to its technical brilliance and visual mastery. The scene emphasises the brutality of war and contextualises the physical and psychological scarring that Macbeth and his peers experience. Macbeth is frequently framed as the centre point of the action, a leader to his men willing to dive headfirst into the violence. The film presents the group of soldiers in a bleak manner, with close-ups of young boys looking on in fear to heighten the emotional stakes and dread. The scene ramps up the anticipation by having handheld shots sit amongst the soldiers, swaying with anxiety to mirror their adrenaline, fear and fury. It's through this battle scene that juxtaposition is created, not just through the use of murky brown colours to cut through the grey-blue fog, but also through its editing between slow motion and normal speed. The film artfully presents moments where the pacing dramatically, surreally crawls almost to a halt. The slow motion beautifully capture mere fleeting moments that are all too hard to keep track of during the relentless chaos of battle. The film further takes advantage of these moments of pause to present some surreal imagery of the weird sisters looming over Macbeth, their otherworldly quality emphasised through the colours shifting to a sickly yellow. The battle scene does a phenomenal job at establishing our characters and presenting the overarching presence of fate, all through brilliantly well-crafted images. It's a stark and bleak situation, but there is so much beauty in how the film chooses to create visual contrast through its composition, its handling of colour, and its purposeful editing. The editing does stick out quite a bit to me because of how tight and concise it feels. Everything feels so purposeful. I mean, it'd be easy to let such beautiful shots overrun and in turn lose their impact, but instead there's a perfect pace and rhythm to it. In particular, the use of jump cutting is impressive, especially when Macbeth debates to himself about killing Duncan. The scene manages to merge entirely separate shots of Macbeth's speech together in such a way that it does a brilliant job at expressing the chaos of his inner psyche. Another moment of jump cutting that achieves a similar effect is when we are presented a montage of Macbeth in his castle, seemingly going mad as he sways and runs around and sword fights with nothing. It even has a time-lapse shot of him standing still to only further emphasise his diminishing psychological state. It is truly marvellous how the film utilises its composition and colour and editing to full effect to create this awe-inspiring, immersive experience. I think it absolutely succeeds in enveloping you in the world and locking you into its story. So it quite clearly has a lot of delicious, yummy eye candy, all of it so technically well done. So the question comes to, does it marry the imagery with the text? I would say the answer is yes, unsurprisingly. I feel strongly that the film uses the visuals brilliantly to emphasise and elevate Shakespeare's words. The famous dagger scene is an important moment in catalysing Macbeth's decision to follow through with the murder of the king. It's instrumental, in fact, in establishing the beginning fractures of Macbeth's mind and how his ambition takes form. In the film, it opts for a more quiet and understated approach to presenting the vision of the dagger, instead giving us one of the child soldiers from the opening battle scene as an apparition who holds the dagger to Macbeth. It's a superb way to subvert any expectation of what might already be expected from the scene, as well as emphasising Macbeth's trauma and guilt. There's also Lady Macbeth's final monologue before her off-screen death, where she tries to rid herself of her guilt, crying out, "Out, damn Spot, out!" The film, once again, goes for a more understated approach and presents the quiet tragedy of her collapse in a bleak and cold way. It's a drawn-out scene where she delivers her speech to a vision of her deceased child, illuminated in a spill of morning light and wrapped in a chilling pale blue colour. It does such a stunning job at visually presenting the moments before her demise as this eerie, melancholic and atmospheric moment of self-reflection. Macbeth's climactic confrontation with Macduff is another example of using the visuals to help support the language. We aren't left to our imagination as to how their fight goes. We instead bear witness to it as the opposing warriors clash in a sea of orange and red. It's through the burning embers of the woods that we bear witness to the tyrant Macbeth fall, the bold colour creating a distinctly mythical atmosphere to emphasise the gravity of their battle. Once again, slow motion is used in moments for breathing room amongst the violent chaos before the scene crawls down to a mesmerisingly slow pace as the two characters are confronted by their men, the spirits of the dead and the weird sisters. It's in this final moment of fog and ash that fate comes to confront them both. The film manages to beautifully capture the story in a distinctly stylistic manner that perfectly balances bleak realism with surreal uses of slow motion and oversaturated washes of colour. It establishes the story as an important representation of history and war, while never steering too far from the drama of its narrative that makes it such a compelling theatrical piece. The visual depiction becomes essential in crafting the story's tone and emphasising the themes. All in all, it becomes a truly poetic piece of cinema, operating on a pure and distinct level of expression. It's obviously helped by a brilliant score, wonderful performances, and so on, but the visual language of the film remains to be a crucial way in which it is able to adapt the timeless story by Shakespeare into one of the most stunning pieces of cinema I think we'll ever see. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really do love this film. I think it is just a stunning piece of art, sometimes so stunning that it's hard to put into words. But hopefully through showing it here and talking about it, I've been able to encourage you all to experience it for yourself, especially if you're able to watch it on a big screen. The bigger the screen, the better. It is a visual treat, honestly. There's no way I can do it justice by having it, compressed here on YouTube. I'm still yet to watch Mr. Cohen's take on Macbeth with Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand, but I've been waiting for that for ages and I cannot wait to watch it, so I will absolutely jump on that when I can. What are some of your favourite film adaptations of Shakespeare? Do you have any? Do you even like Shakespeare? I mean, I don't blame you if you don't. It's long. Or is there an adaptation of just any play for that matter that you particularly enjoy? Comment below, let me know. Consider subscribing and liking this video if you fancy it. I'm always looking to get better at these discussion videos, and I'm hoping to try and get them out there every week. That's the end of it. Thank you very much. Much love.